What would you say is the biggest misconception of your job?
Biggest misconception of my job. Oh, I'll say it this way. It don't take all that, does it? And so what I mean by that is someone could look at, the finished product of a written story or something, related to communications and may think, okay, well, to get to this end result, you just do this, and it's done. But really, with my role as editor-in-chief for the publication I work with, I'm touching a story from kind of the incubation process of it being an idea to the very end process of it being published on the internet. And for me, that could be easily a 2-month window of walking a story out from that process to the very end. Sometimes it's longer than that, depending on what's needed to move something forward. So yeah, it does take all that.
Welcome to the Imagine Exposure Vodcast, the vodcast where we reverse engineer or help young people better reverse engineer their career goals by talking to dynamic and diverse professionals. We definitely have a very celebrated editor, journalist who does so many things. I had an opportunity to meet this young lady when I had a chance to serve. I did a brief internship with partial internship with the Impact Movement in Orlando, Florida, and now she's doing some other wonderful and incredible things. And so, what I like to do is I like to let the guests explain themselves and give their background. But I'm talking about none other than Melody Copenny. How you doing, Melody?
Good morning, Zach. I'm doing well. How are you doing?
Doing well, doing well, doing well.
Awesome.
Our first question out the gate is, who are you and how would you define yourself?
It's a great question. Who am I? Well, my name is Melody Copenny. I go by Mel, by those who know me well. And who am I? I am a woman who is continuing to become who I am. And a lot of that is discovering my gifts and passions in the area of communications and how that helps me show up well in the world. So I enjoy communicating, I enjoy writing, and connecting to topics that involve popular culture, theology, growth and development in spiritual formation, and just how that all comes together. For me, that's most expressed in my Blackness as an African-American Christian woman of faith, but also seeing others in their journeys as they navigate their lives as well. So.
What is your story, at least as it pertains to work and vocation? What's your story?
What is my story as it relates to, you said, my motivation?
Work and vocation, but like I said, you can curtail it, whatever you feel comfortable sharing on a podcast.
I mean,
that
nice.
Can go deep. That can go deep.
That is my story. I mean, it's a lot of things. I would say part of my story is I am the daughter of James and Gloria. I grew up loved by my parents. They were not married, and by the time I was 4, they had, finalized their relationship and moved on from that relationship, but they continued to parent me together. And so I grew up very much I think, intentional, observant, just aware of the world kind of child. I didn't have any siblings that I grew up with, so I was an only child. And I think that shaped a lot of how I saw the world, in that I wanted to see and observe it before I went out and experienced it. And even seeing how that has grown with me into adulthood. And I would even say, like, a lot of the ways in which I do my profession as a journalist, some of just the inherent qualities and skills of journalists, I had embedded in me as a child because of how I grew up and experienced the world. And so observation, being very aware of details, being very aware of what I'm seeing and experiencing in the people that I'm interacting with. which is really great when you're a journalist because you got to take hold of lots of information and figure out where to apply it. But growing up, I loved reading, I loved writing, loved the arts. And so those things shaped me very early as well. I started writing in my teens. So I've been writing since I was 15 years old, and I'm almost going to be 43 in about 3 weeks. So a great deal of my life has been with pen and paper or laptops and screens. And so, I mean, that's a big piece of my story, is how writing and communication was a way for me to grow and develop and experience the world as a child, and how that really went with me into my teen years, young adult years, and then my professional life as an adult. I always knew that communicating and writing would be a part of how I would kind of move and be in the world with a profession. It's like drinking water. It's very natural to me. And it's a very easy gift that God has given me to apply as well in the world.
What would you say is the biggest misconception of your job?
Biggest misconception of my job. Oh, I'll say it this way. It don't take all that, does it? And so what I mean by that is someone could look at, the finished product of a written story or something, related to communications, and may think, okay, well, to get to this end result, you just do this, it is, and it's done. But really, with my role as editor-in-chief for the publication I work with, I'm touching a story from kind of the incubation process of it being an idea to the very end process of it being published on the internet. And for me, that could be easily a 2-month window of walking a story out from that process to the very end. Sometimes it's longer than that, depending on what's needed to move something forward. So yeah, it does take all that.
I love it. Okay. Who are the people in your vocational story in which you're the most grateful for?
The people in my vocational story that I'm most grateful for. So I had a mentor in high school, Miss Norma Hollingsworth. I don't know how Miss Hollingsworth is doing today. I hope she's well. But she was the advisor of my high school newspaper team. And so she was kind of one of those first people that got me going in the world of journalism, would push me, but saw a lot of leadership ability in me and just really poured into me in those areas. I'd also say my high school 10th grade English teacher, Coach Godfrey, who also was our high school's coach for football. He's just a gruff black man, like just gruff. But he loved like literature and English. That was his thing. And so, long story made short, I was placed in his class by accident. I should have been in a different class for like advanced English, but I was placed in his class by accident. So that whole year, I actually got exposed to all of this like amazing literature, African literature, that I actually wouldn't have gotten if I had been in the other class. But at the end of that year, I remember him telling me, you need to join the journalism, the newspaper group. Like, you need to go ahead and be a part of this team. You need to be writing. And it was like the first time someone had said something to me around journalism and me writing, and they coming together, because I really didn't know much about journalism as a 10th grader. And so that's when I reached out to Miss Hollingsworth, got connected to the school newspaper. And that just changed the trajectory of my life and my career, because of really Coach Godfrey putting that bug in my ear. I think you need to do this. And so all of it, none of it was by chance. Like, the Lord worked through all those things, I can clearly see. And being in his class by accident wasn't an accident. But those two come to mind.
That's awesome. That's awesome. You thinking about those who have shaped our career paths in ways that we can't even imagine. Like you said, it was by quote unquote accident, but we know that there is a bigger plan in store. Okay, so this is a question that helps young people to see how their passions right now, they're not for no reason, going back to there being no accidents. And so the question is, how did your childhood passion as a kid prepare you for your adult career choice?
Ooh. Well, I mean, very practically, One of the things I love doing on the weekend, Saturdays with my mom, is she'd take me to the local library. I had my own little library card. I don't know how young I was. I had to be under the age of 9. I was real little going to the library. And I would check out literally stacks of books, just books, so many books at a time. I had a huge curiosity for learning, another skill I later developed as I got older, as just the natural gifting that I have. And so that inquisitiveness, along with the desire to read, funneling my desire to communicate, gave me this huge appetite for words and communicating that, again, be woven into my story later on as I stepped into a career around writing and editing and communication. So something as simple as loving reading as a child was inherently a big part of how I would eventually end up moving toward a career path that involved reading and writing, all the time.
Okay, so this next question is about the economy of words. So I know you got that. How would you explain what you do as a professional in one sentence? Now, how would you explain what you do as a professional in one word?
Zach, these questions, it's too early in the morning to like this. How would I explain what I do in one sentence? Okay, so this actually is a tagline from our publication. So showing God in action in and through his people in the world is what I get to do in my role as an editor, as well as a journalist with a faith-based publication that talks about what God's doing in the world through this particular ministry that I work with. And then in terms of describing what I do in one word, gosh. I would say connectedness or connecting, because there's something powerful about the gift of storytelling and bridging the experiences of people with the realities of the lives that they're living so that others can learn and also be encouraged, moved, motivated. That's something about even journalism as a early college student that I fell in love with, and probably actually in high school, the whole idea of like a human interest feature story. I didn't care about like the basic news, a building burned down, cops arrested, this is important stuff, right, for communities. What always grabbed me were stories about real people, real life, and real tensions that they were grappling with, and either how they overcame it or how they were working to just work through it. I love that as a young person, and that stayed with me into adulthood in terms of what motivates me to do the type of work that I do, because I want people to be influenced and touched by the stories of other people. And so to be a facilitator of that, it's a good thing. I really like that.
What do you love the most about your job?
What do I love the most? This is something recent, but being able to make decisions and be respected and seen in my decision making. So I'm an African-American woman leading a team of people who don't look like me. I'm the only Black person on my team. Also being a woman, I'm leading a team of mostly men on my smaller editorial team. And so I'm in a space where my leadership and my voice are being heard and respected in environments where in the past, one, there's not always been the opportunity for Black women to be even invited to spaces to lead, but then also to be heard in their leadership. And so I know that my team not only respects me because of the position, but they respect me because of the way that I lead from influence and my care for them. And so that has been encouraging to see, I would say how I would phrase it, not only my competency, but like the breadth of my character go before me in the leadership that I walk out, if that makes sense.
That makes perfect sense. What would you say is the biggest challenge? On the other end of the coin, talk about thing you love the most. What's the biggest challenge?
change processes are the biggest challenge. I'm currently in a pretty major myriad of projects, is what I want to call them. But they're all connected toward the evolution of the publication and it being set up well for its next, season of development and effectiveness. But to get to that place, there are decisions that are being made now and more so actions that are being applied, and I'll need to communicate to the team so that they understand this is the direction we are going to be moving in, so that we can be effective and strategic in the work that we do. Change is never easy. Sometimes it is, though, if you get to create it for yourself. But then most of the time, change is brought into our lives by other forces or other realities. And we have to learn what it looks like to process the news of the change, but also walk out the effects of the change. And they're not the same. And so I am leading my team through that process. And it's not actually quite started in a public way. So there are smaller groups of people that are aware, but I'll be walking out more so like what it looks like to cast vision for the larger team, create alignment for them to move with the change, and then support them well in what's going to be a new way of doing the work that we do. So that's not easy. It's not easy to do at all.
It's the first time we've had that answer, but I definitely can see how that, it can be very difficult, challenging at times, for sure. Okay, what steps would you say a person must accomplish to either become certified or respected in your career choice or profession?
What steps? Some of it is relational and some of it is functional by competency. So if you're seeking to really develop a career in journalism, you're going to have to go to college. Most people need to do this. I mean, there could be some that are in the field that didn't go, but I don't know of many. But you'll need to obtain at least a bachelor's degree with a concentration in journalism. There's a myriad of different fields that you could pick. I pursued magazine journalism as my concentration, and I'm sure, and that was 20 years ago. So I'm sure there's even more that's been developed and nuanced in the career. But a degree in journalism is a baseline starting point. Depending on what you pick will determine the route that you'll have to take next, in terms of if it's news broadcast journalism, if it's writing, if it's digital, all types of things, public relations. So that's like competency education. I think relationally is so vital to develop relationships with people in the business, in the industry. One amazing organization that I got connected to as a college student was the National Association of Black Journalists. There are lots of journalism organizations based on ethnicity as well as the type of journalism that you're trying to do. But NABJ was wonderful for me in college. I've connected, as a professional. Last year, they had a virtual conference. My first NABJ conference I've gone to, convention. It was so amazing. I mean, it was really, really good. So I can't imagine what the conventions in real life are like. I'm sure they are really, really good as well. But those kind of relational connections, I think, are super important as well, because it's good to have connections with people in your industry that you can talk to about real stuff and who also can be great points of connection for networking. I've been told, and it is so true, it isn't so much about, it is helpful to be skilled, but sometimes it's not so much about your skill and ability, but who you know and where they are in the world. And how where they are could help you in terms of the doors that you're looking to see open, that they have influence to open. So that relational part with your competency, both of them I think are really important.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. How would you say, and this is a question that has to do with access, a lot of times, specifically in our communities of color, this is not a question that we talk about often, but I think that our guests can provide a certain type of insight to this type of question. And so this question is, how does a person either negotiate salary or the value of their services in this given career choice?
It's a very good question. Well, one, I think you need to know what the value of what you bring in your own skill set and abilities and experiences. Like, what is that worth to you? Because I can't go to someone that I'm seeking employment from and expect for them to give me value. And that's true outside of job spaces. I'm not going to go to another person and ask them to assign a level of worth to me when they didn't make me. They aren't in my day-to-day life doing the things that I'm doing the work that I'm doing. So that's not a question they can answer. So as it relates to job salary, I really think that you need to have a sense of what are your goals and what are the goals you have financially that also represent the level of skill, experience, and time and development that you have made in, the career, the industry that you've been a part of. And so I've been in the work that I've been doing now for over 20 years, almost 21 come next month. And I know that my breadth of value is huge because of the nature of the types of jobs I've done, the roles I've led, the projects that I've given leadership to. And so it is, for me, something that's in my responsibility to know like what this looks like. How do I translate it on a resume? How do I communicate it to a potential employer in terms of the type of salary that I'm competitively looking for? Because I know the work that I've done, and I know the ways that and I know the kind of worker that I am and what I'm due. Like, I think that's also important. Like, you pay your dues. So like, what are you doing in this season of your life? And how do you want that to be reflected? So there are different ways to approach it, but those are just some of the thoughts I have about that.
No, I mean, I think that is the core issue that I think a lot of times we overlook is value. Even when we resume, when we're doing any of the negotiation processes, what value are you adding to that company? And you're right. No one else can tell you, oh, what that looks like. You know, who you're very acquainted with your experiences and your expertise and the things that you have accomplished in the past. And so that's a good insight. Based on, this is the time machine question. Hopefully we're doing it on time. Based the time machine question, based on what you know now about your vocation, what advice would you give yourself if you can go back on the first day of the job?
What advice would you give based on what you know now? What advice? I think one thing I would say is to myself, be more open to the opportunities that come your way and the ones you don't even know about. So, be looking for ways to grow and develop yourself in the career that's in front of you. And let that openness open doors, I know often they say I have a 5-year plan, a 10-year plan, I have a track that I'm on. I've really never had that approach to my life. Like, maybe in different seasons, I'm like, well, by the time I did, but I think I really have lived with my hands open to God, and so much has come to me because my hands were open to receive the opportunities that came. I did have a sense of like structure and what I wanted to accomplish. And even looking at my life right now, I've reached in some ways the kind of like one of the goals of my professional life. If I look at it from the standpoint of, being a journalist, starting out as a journalist, as a writer, I was given the opportunity to step into editorial leadership a few years ago and became managing editor of the publication I work for. And then last year I was promoted to become editor-in-chief. And so, I mean, in terms of like what would be next for someone in media, maybe publisher of something or CEO, I don't really have aspirations for those types of things. But in terms of the nitty-gritty of journalism and what drew my heart to it as a 15-year-old, I've already been able to like hit these milestones at 42, by 42. And so I think about life in the future and it's like, okay, Lord, well, what could be the next thing for me? What are the things that I know I'm gifted in, but maybe I haven't had the opportunity to explore them yet, or I don't even know what they are yet, and I want to find out. So that's exciting to me to see what that could look like too.
Okay. How do you prepare to one day transition from this role? Thinking about in-game retirement, what does transition look like for you?
Well, sometimes people will say, don't leave a job without having someone in place to step into the role. I think that's adequate and true. Maybe not in all situations. And why I say that is sometimes when it's time to go, you just got to leave, right? And trust that in the way that you were led to that space for what it was and the time it was, that if it is time for you to go and there isn't someone in place to step in after you, that space will still be covered in whatever way it needs to be, and you got to go ahead and move on. So I think in some ways, if you can, look for a leader to step into that role that you're going to be vacating. It's a good move. I don't think you have to be stuck to that process all the time. As I think about in-game next steps, and even that concept of retirement, I think with retirement, yes, it is very good to have a financial future set up for yourself. I don't think retirement should mean that your life and the activity of your body in the world needs to slow down. And what I mean by that, because I've heard people talk about this recently, like there could still be so much goodness and effectiveness and fruitfulness in those years of retirement that, and from my perspective as a person of faith, that God has in your life that he wants to give into the world. But if the mindset is, I'm just going to slow down and focus on myself and just live for me, that isn't the mindset that I want for me. So I'm like, every year you have on the earth, every month you have on the earth, there's purpose for it. And so I want to live even into my years in the future with a lot of intention and purpose. So I don't know if that answers your question, but that's
No. That's good. The only person Miss Tracy Warren also had a very similar mindset and perspective, just kind of the internal perspective and how it shapes even how we do vocation and that sort of thing. And so, yeah, it does. I mean, I intentionally invite guests on that would have that type of perspective, and I want to hear a variety of different, words of insight in that transitional plan, and have the student kind of figure out for themselves, like, what does that look like moving forward if they decide to transition, retire, or what have you. So this is called the Cultivate Countdown. What this is, I have two memes that we put for every guest. The first one is Cultivate Countdown, and what that is like, what are general principles for your job? So if there were 3 principles to be an editor and a journalist, or 5 or whatever, what would that look like for you when you go to work every day? You kind of think, this is what I want to try to accomplish in doing my job, my task.
Be intentional. That's a big one. Intentional in the work that you do, intentional in the story ideas that you're developing, intentional in the editing that you're applying to work. Be thorough. Journalism is very much about thoroughness and accuracy. You cannot publish things that are not true, ever. And so being a stickler to, and I think with that is a level of professionalism too, because I want to make sure that what I turn in and what I give out is reflective of the amount of time and effort that I've actually put into it, and I care about it. So I'm going to make sure that it is correct and accurate. Because if it's not, then why is it being told? What is this? And then I would say another thing would be come to the table ready to create. Creativity with collaboration are so important, I think, in the space that I work in. As you're working with other people, even as you're working solo on different projects and assignments, being able to have a creative heart and mind creates so much freedom in what you're able to produce as well.
Awesome. That is an awesome list. And I'll, of course, with every guest, I make sure that you guys are all the editors of this presentation. But I want to try to capture every nugget of that. That was good. Last two quote or questions. The first one is, what is your motivational quote? What is, if you put it on a meme, this is something that you would say, hey, this is you. And you can't boil yourself down to a sentence, but what would you say is your motivational quote?
So this is an excellent question. And the first thing that came to mind, I'm gonna go find it because I keep it
Okay, please.
handy. Give me 1 second. Okay.
It only makes sense that someone who structured her life around words would have some words like
Okay, right. So
that.
Ava DuVernay, well-known African-American director, filmmaker, talented person. So when she created her series Queen Sugar, TV series, the first season, they have all these little like behind the scenes videos and interviews. And she was giving perspective around like the dynamics of some of the characters. And so she said this one particular statement and it just resonated with me. She said, the same story told from two different perspectives have completely different meanings. That's what life is. Same story told from completely different perspectives. Told from two different perspectives have completely different meanings. That's what life is. And it's so true. I mean, that resonates with me because I'm a storyteller, I'm a writer. It resonates with me because I'm a human being and I have been in situations where my perspective is what it is. Somebody else's perspective is what it is. And I think sometimes we want to live in the space where, well, my perspective is right and you did wrong, so I'm right and you're wrong. Well, is it possible that your perspective is true and mine is too? And guess what? There could be a whole other level that's a different side of looking at the whole story. That's another perspective. And so we're all in this journey of relationship, collaboration, conflict, tension, resolution. Like these things are happening. These are story concepts as well. These things are happening all the time in how we relate as human beings. And there has to be a way of recognizing, well, this is just the way that life actually ebbs and flows. And your story can be true and real, and mine can too. Like the two different perspectives actually don't need to cancel each other out. How can they exist together? And me learn more about your perspective and your journey because I'm opening myself up to see your side. And the same for you. So like that definitely, I would say, has been one of the statements that I hold close and I kind of keep it in my pocket because it defines a lot of living, you know, whatever season you could be in.
Absolutely. So, and then just for clarity, when we put it on the meme, am I putting that as your statement or is that an interaction with Ava DuVernay's or who would be credited for that statement?
I think Ava should be credited because they are her words.
Okay.
But you could say something like, you know, Melody, one of her favorite statements is a quote by director Ava DuVernay. Yeah.
All right. Well, last but not least, any other final thoughts, things that we did not capture or touch on, or even if you want someone to pick up your magazine or want someone to find you, where would you have the viewer go?
Great question. Actually, our publication has just gotten a kind of new makeover and a new website address, which I do not know by heart. But let me see if I can find it real quickly. So if you want to check out some of the stories that I have an opportunity to shape and create, there are two places you could go right now. I'm not sure when this interview is going to be released, but as of today, you could go to our current site, which is more so, I would say, our older site that we're moving away from. But that URL is cru.org/storylines. And so that's STORYLINES. I work for a publication called Cru Storylines. And our newer website that we're moving to, that's actually live right now, is storylines.cru.org. So if you go there, you'll be able to see the new stories that are being published as of May 2022 and the new ones that'll be added as the year progresses.
Awesome. And I'll find it and I'll find a way to add it in the comments. So Melody, I do appreciate your time. Thank you so very, very much for sharing your knowledge, wisdom, and insight. And you have a great day.
You too. I look forward to seeing this. Bye.